Hi, guys. Welcome to Para Women Radio. I'm Amy. The Richard Allen trial continues in Delphi, Indiana, a case shrouded in mystery and intrigue. It revolves around two teenage girls who ventured out for a day of adventure and photography on a local bridge, only to never return. Initially, I had always believed there was an axe type of element to the crime, but upon delving into the details of the girl's final moments, I'm truly perplexed. Uh, One girl was discovered wearing nothing, while the other was found wearing her friend's clothing and both of their bras. Surprisingly, neither girl suffered any axe type of harm. The lack of concrete evidence in the state's case so far is alarming, and the absence of any filming of the proceedings only adds to the air of secrecy surrounding this case. I can't help but suspect the presence of police corruption and other sinister forces at play, like Odinism, which we covered on Sunday, which has been taken over by white people who believe their race to be the best. Not sure what I can and cannot say on YouTube, but I think you know what I'm saying. So I'm going to roll some credits while I wait for the rest of the Wednesday Power crew to roll in. Shout out to my Dragonflies and to my Power Replay crew. It's Devil's Nights, you all. What are you going to do? Do you celebrate Devil's Night in your town? I know I keep asking this, but I grew up in Detroit, and in Detroit, Devil's Night was the night to flip on your porch light and to keep an eye open for the soap and the toilet paper and the eggs, and it's probably all illegal now, so you probably don't do it, right? Please welcome to Para Women Radio. I'm Amy.
Carefully strumming his old guitar again. Words rolling out into our fire. If heaven had wings, I would steal them and fly away with you for a while. Hearing the essence of gratitude, dreamy little smile on my lips. I miss my cue, but baby, I had you. Miss my cue, but I had you for that day. Here in the blue, I'm falling deep into you.
Here in the blue, I'm dancing with you again tonight, and I'm so happy to be here with you all. A big happy birthday to Heavenly's son, Drake. Happy birthday, Drake. Hi, Heavenly. Hi, Main Chick. How are you doing? How's everyone tonight? You ready to talk about the Delphi case again? We talked about it on Sunday, and I woke up to it again this morning and went into greater detail because, when I first covered the case, I did it with Skincare and Suspects about a year ago with Angela from Angela's Aging Essentials, and we didn't know all that we know now, right? So today was very interesting. I want to talk a little bit about what the confessions that Richard Allen has done today. But first, I want to go back and I want to talk about the girls because I had no idea the torture that these girls went through. Because, when you hear about these things, you always hope that, hold on a second, I got to take my sweatshirt off. Hold on. It's that time of year where you get hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. You always hope that they don't suffer, But in what I'm finding out, I think they suffered. They suffered for at least 5 to 10 minutes, and that's a long time to suffer, in my opinion. So I wanted to go into it and talk a little bit more about what the girls, their final moments were like, the lack of evidence in the case. Have you been following the Delphi case? I know that I don't think a lot of people were following. Well, people were following it initially, and then like it's been 5 years now in the making, and so like it kind of died down, and then I don't think it's being as covered as heavily because it's not being there's no cameras in the courtroom. But now that the Sarah Boone trial is over, I'm noticing that more and more content creators are kind of shifting their focus over to this case, and I think it needs to happen because this case terrifies me because I have serious doubt as to whether this man is guilty or not. Um, but it's still the state's case. I mean, there's still more time in it. So who knows? Who knows? Who knows? But I get worried. Because it's a small town. I lived in a small town. I was a social worker in a small town. I know small town politics. I know the Good Old Boy Network is alive and well in small towns. And this man is obviously Richard Allen, whether he did it or he didn't do it, he's suffering tremendously in prison because he's been reduced to the point where he's eating his feces and drinking his urine. So something's happening. And he's not being held in a jail. He's being held in the state prison. And he never went to the jail. They took him right to the state prison. So it's just shocking to me. But let's go ahead and let me get my screen together. Be sure to give this live a thumbs up. I like to do the algorithm dance party where you just warm up your fingers and start dancing them right up to the hearts and thumbs up button. Today we're coming to you on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone over on Facebook. I see you. Hi, everyone over on YouTube. I see you. I don't have Twitch pulled up, so hi, everyone over on Twitch. I don't see you. But my screen is ready to go. Hi, Pauline. How are you doing? Okay. Just before I went live, I was looking over on Instagram and I found this kind of exciting. I noticed that that Kendall Ray, they have a new, where was it? They have a new they used to support the Thorn Foundation, and I don't think they want to do that anymore, with what's happening with Diddy and all that. So they've started their own foundation to support true crime victims, and I'm seriously considering us supporting that foundation because we do support Banny, the baby elephant that was hit by a train, but I also want to include a foundation where we're supporting true crime victims. And so I was really excited when I saw that. Okay, so let me make sure you're seeing it. You are. Okay. What do you guys think about this case? Do you think Richard Allen is possible? Do you think he's guilty, or do you think he's not guilty, or you just don't know enough yet to make a decision? Delphi murder trial, and we want to talk about the girls tonight. Like I said, these were two girls aged 13 and 14 that went out on February 14th to explore a trail and a bridge. It was the Monine High Bridge Trail, and it was on February 13th that they went out, 2017. They were found on February 14th, 2017. And we're going to talk about how they were found, the state that they were found in, their final moments. Broke my heart because one person testified that there was blood and tears mixed on Libby's face, one of the girls' face, which means that she was crying while she was bleeding. And there was also on one of the girls, both of the girls' blood on one of their bodies. So that means that at one point they were hugging each other, touching each other. They thought they were walking around while they were injured. Just a lot, you guys. They went through a lot, I suspect. And so I just wanted to talk about it a little bit more. Delphi, Indiana, a pattern on the body of Delphi, Indiana murder victim Libby German showed her blood was mixed with moisture. An officer testified at Richard Allen's trial. The officer said he believes that the moisture was Libby's tears, which led family members watching his testimony in the courtroom to audibly react. Libby, 14, and her best friend, Abby Williams, 13, were walking along a hiking trail in rural Delphi, Indiana, when their throats were, I don't know how to say this, were harmed, and they were left in the woods on February 13th, 2017. Their bodies were found the next day. YouTube's very weird about words that we use, so I'm going to dance around these words. I also won't read everything and or watch everything that we watch. I put everything that we watch, the link in the show notes for YouTube, down in the YouTube show notes description. And if you want to, you can find all the show notes there. Allen was arrested in 2022 and has pleaded not guilty. Pat Croco of the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department took the stand Monday. They said Kirko was not at the crime, or I don't even know how to say that. Sakaro? The officer said he was not at the crime scene in 2017, but he said he studied the scene photos and various reports. Abby's mother cried quietly in the courtroom as prosecutors showed close-up photos of the girls' faces, bodies, hands, feet, and legs. The officer showed the jury the image of a blood stain on a tree. He explained it was a transfer stain, meaning it was left behind when a bloodied object touched it. Now, before, the defense was trying to say that blood stain on the tree was a rune symbol, because they're trying to say that this murder was Odinistic in nature, which is a ancient pagan religion that's been kind of overtaken by white supremacists. And they're trying to say that that's what happened. Libby passed away from her wounds in a large pool of blood while leaning against the tree, the officer said. He said he believes she was then dragged about 20 feet to where her body was found. Abby was likely restrained or unconscious when she was unalived, the officer said, because there was no blood on her hands or arms, and she was found with her hands raised vertically. Her final position is almost like she was boxing, he said. The officer said he's been to hundreds of crime scenes and described the position of Abby's body as very unusual. I've never seen it, he said. He also said Abby likely didn't die right away. This would have taken some time, he said. Allen has admitted to being in the hiking trail the day the girls were unalived, but denies any involvement in the murders. So that's like whitewashed from what I have heard and watched today. That was like the best article I could find. There's a more intense one that I will link if you want to hear the really gory details. But we're going to go in and we're going to listen to Vinnie Politan talk about some of these details over on Court TV. Oops. Hold on a second. My screen froze, you guys. Okay.
Someone local, which made it even more difficult for everyone living in this small community. It all started on February 13th, 2017, when Libby and Abby went hiking. The two teenagers were good friends and had the day off from school. The weather was unseasonably warm, but when Libby and Abby did not show up when they were supposed to get picked up, their families began to worry and they began to search. Then the next day, the bodies of these two girls were found, both victims of murder. Then over the course of the next 5+ years, there were no answers, no arrests, just a series of disjointed clues, like two sketches that looked nothing alike, a video of a suspected killer, and a short audio recording of his voice. Then finally, 5 years after the murders, an arrest. Richard Allen, a man who worked at the local CVS, was charged. Someone who was not on anyone's radar, but someone who admitted to being at the bridge that day. Allen says he's innocent, and his lawyers have been battling with the judge to try to present evidence of who they say is actually responsible. Cameras have been banned by the judge, and now the public waits to see if the truth will come out inside of a courtroom. This case, the murder, the investigation, the trial, everything has been a little bit unusual. I want to go back in time, though, to the day after the girls were found. And this is a brutal, brutal scene, but here's the information that was revealed by the Indiana State Police who were leading up this investigation.
Basically, we have identified the bodies of the two females that were found out yesterday. The bodies have been positive identified as Abigail J. Williams, 13, of the Delphi area, and Liberty Rose Lynn German, 14, of the Delphi area. The two girls were reported missing on Monday, February 13th. The bodies were discovered about 12:15 on the 14th in the woods just east of town here by volunteers that helped in the search of the children after they were reported missing to the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. Family has been notified. This is considered a double homicide investigation. No further information will be released at this time.
And that time, again, is 2017, and it became a murder mystery. For 5 years, it wasn't solved. But the other part of it was the investigation, the evidence, everything was kept secret, was kept private, was kept away from the public. And there's reasons why investigators do that, but there's also reasons why some things do get revealed at a certain point. Then they arrest Richard Allen, and still we know very, very little. And then we find out this, which is 6 years after the murders. We finally get a little more information from the state court documents that were filed in June of 2023. Autopsies of the girls ruled their deaths as homicides, and their wounds were caused by a sharp object. That was it. That was it. Like I said, unlike most cases that we cover here on Court TV around the nation, in all states, we're in Indiana for this one. So this secrecy, this lack of transparency and information brings me to our first question, which is extremely important in a murder case, which is how were Abby and Libby murdered? What are the details of what happened to these two?
Just want to remind everyone, this is all my opinion, all my research. I urge you to go out there and do your own research. We're all allowed to have our own opinions and thoughts and feelings on these things. Over here, everybody's allowed to think how they want to think. Just as long as it's done respectfully, we'll listen to it. And yeah.
Young, innocent girls. Joining me, Court TV senior producer, Barbara McDonald. and retired medical examiner and forensic pathologist, Dr. Michelle Dupree. Thank you both. Barbara, I want to begin here and take a look at what has come out, what we've learned about Abigail Williams. One gaping wound on the neck, approximately 1 inch deep, likely cut right to left. Markings on the face consistent with some type of restraint on the lower face underneath the mouth. This is information that
so this one is definitely going to be a little triggering for some, because we're talking about the wounds a little bit more than we normally would talk about on this. I don't know if we've spoke really in depth on wounds and whatnot, but just before we go forward, just a little trigger warning for some.
To me, very new that we're learning and beginning to paint a more precise picture of what happened to Abigail here.
Yeah, we got that information when the forensic pathologist testified, and that's Dr. Roland Kaur. He described the one injury to Abby. Libby had more injuries, but he also described that after these injuries were inflicted, that it would have taken 5 to 10 minutes, perhaps longer, for them to become unconscious and then to pass away. Also on the stand, he talked about a murder weapon. He, for many years in his report, said that he didn't know what sort of weapon was used, just that it was a sharp object. But he testified in court that he now believes, in the last couple of months, he's come to believe that it might have been a box cutter that was used. And he said he figured that out because of some markings on Libby's neck that looked like they were caused by a serrated blade, and that he was working in his own shop at his home one day and saw a box cutter and said, that looks like what could have caused these wounds, or at least the one wound to Libby. On cross-examination, though, he did admit that that was purely speculation on his part, and he doesn't have any hard evidence that that was, in fact, the weapon.
Dr. Dupree, 1 inch deep, cut right to left. What does that tell you?
Well, that tells you that whoever did this was probably right-handed, because that is the way that a typical person would do that. They would cut from right to left.
The markings on the face consistent with some type of restraint on the lower face under the mouth. I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, it's a very faint marking that he said was more visible in the photographs that he took at autopsy and not as visible on the body. He described it as being below the mouth, so not preventing her from being able to breathe, if that was in fact a restraint that was on her during this attack. But he couldn't explain what caused it, other than to refer to it as some sort of a restraint.
So Dr. Dupree, how can someone make that determination?
Well, sometimes it's very difficult, but if there is some kind of bruising or some kind of redness or something like that, it may be if he held her throat or held her chin and then sliced her throat, that could be what caused that. And it would cause a very subtle injury.
Now, looking at what happened to Libby, 3 to 5 wounds on her neck. 2 injuries look like they had a second pass. Blood on hands indicates Libby tried to put pressure on the wounds to stop the bleeding. And again, as Barbara's reporting, believes a box cutter caused the serrated marks on Libby's leftmost wound. Let's start there, Dr. Dupree, with the box cutter theory. What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's certainly possible.
So they think that Abby, who is the little girl, she's always this is Abby and this is Libby. I put their names on the thumbnail so that you could kind of see also. So they believe that Libby was the target. Libby was the one that was found unclothed. Abby was found wearing Libby's clothing plus her bra. So at one point they were both undressed. And they think that and Abby didn't have any blood on her hands, so they think that because you get cut in that area, your instinct is to draw your hand up there, right? So they think that she was either bound or she was unconscious. And then there's poor Libby, who there's evidence that she walked around, she cried, the blood got mixed in with the tears. One person described it as if like her hand was bloody. The tears were coming down her eyes. So she went to wipe, her tears, and yeah, just horrible.
Blood on hands indicates Libby tried to put pressure on the wounds to stop the bleeding. And again, as Barbara's reporting, believes a box cutter caused the serrated marks on Libby's leftmost wound. Let's start there, Dr. Dupree, with the box cutter theory. What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's certainly possible. It appears that what he is describing is a very thin blade, perhaps serrated, and there are many, many types of box cutters or utility knives that would have a serrated edge on that. So it's very likely that could be what caused it.
Now, another part is the autopsy more of the autopsy findings. It's performed on the morning of February 15th, but they can't determine the exact time of death. The girls likely died somewhere around 41 hours before the autopsy. Rape kits were performed. No signs of sexual trauma. And Barbara, again, this is a big part of this, right? Girls may have been alive for 5 to 10 minutes after the infliction of the wounds. Putting these pieces together with everything else that you know about this case, Barbara, what are you taking away from?
I think it's huge that there was no ex trauma, but in his, I don't know if you want to take him as he has like confessed over and over and over again, but he has said that he is in this prison with these Odinism guards that wear these patches that say "In Odin we trust," that they're forcing him to do all of these because he's written them out. He has done them on the phone. He's just confessing. And yeah.
What we learned from the forensic pathologist.
One of the things that I wondered as he talked about that 5 to 10 minute window where the girls
but Richard Allen in his confessions has said that he was going to ex Libby but couldn't. And then he's also said that he has done it to his daughter and to his young sister when they were young. I don't know. Now that's not been proven or any. I mean, like the man was eating his feces and drinking his urine too, and has lost a lot of weight. So stuff is going on with Richard Allen. Stuff is going on with Richard Allen. The psychiatric nurse that was treating him in prison. Like even she's corrupt. She was fired. She was fired because she was being inappropriate. She was treating him and then going and talking on all these forums online. Like at night, she would go home and talk about the case. Like, and people in the forums were like, "You're talking about this case an awful lot. Maybe you need to relax." And she's treating him. It's just craziness.
That Abby certainly would have been able to breathe, that she could have been able to cry or speak. And that they could have moved. And we've heard a lot of the defense theory that the scene was staged and that these girls were positioned. And as the forensic,
they weren't SA'd, and I really thought that they had been, but they weren't. And it's been, and in one of the confessions, Richard Allen has said that like he was planning on it, but he couldn't do it. He and it's also said that when he was telling the psychiatrist this, he had an erection. I don't know. The man is sick, and either way, he's sick. If he did it, he's really sick, and if he's had a mental break, and if he didn't do it, he's never going to be okay. He's never going to be all right. And he said so much. When the police picked him up, he's like, "It's over." And the police were trying to say, like, he said it was over, like, as in the jig was up. But then later he said, "No, like, my life is over. I live in a small town. Everybody thinks I did this and I didn't do it. And my life is over." So.
The pathologist testified. I kind of wondered if during that time, the girls perhaps moved themselves. into the positions that they were ultimately found in.
Dr. Dupree, 5 to 10 minutes after the wounds, they're surviving. How much suffering, how much pain, how cognizant are they of what is happening in the moment?
Well, they would certainly have a lot of emotions. They would be scared. They would be absolutely terrified. They would be in pain. They would be bleeding basically out. They wouldn't probably be conscious for the whole 5 to 10 minutes because they would pass out from the lack of blood. However, it would be a very painful death.
This is difficult. Barbara, any reaction from the family to all of these new details being revealed?
I wasn't able they have the media sitting in the front row of the courtroom, so I wasn't able during much of that testimony to look back at the reaction. But throughout these days in court, we have seen a lot of very emotional reactions from these families. You can tell that they're crying during breaks, during testimony, that it is very, very difficult. It's difficult for everyone to listen to many of these details.
Hey, Harlot, it's good to see you, honey. I didn't know that he was also on Halidol. Halidol is powerful. It is very powerful. I had an experience on that when I was going through what I was going through. I was very sick, and my mother's husband was abusing me, and I just didn't want to live anymore. And so I ended up in being Baker acted, and they shot me up with Halidol and something else, and then just put me out out there. And from what I can remember, I remember a guy coming up to me and being like waving me on because I wanted something. I don't remember what it was I wanted, but I kept asking for it and they weren't giving it to me. And the guy came and tapped me and he like waved me on. And I was like, oh, you know, like, so I followed him and I went into the bathroom and he undressed and and a woman ran in behind me. It was another patient. And she's like, I told the nurses, I was telling the nurses they're not listening to me. And she pulled me out. I could have been raped on Halidol. So, I mean, I just feel like this man is not getting a fair trial, and everybody deserves a fair trial. And he's not getting it. He just really is not getting it.
Details and see these photos of the crime scene and the autopsy. They're very graphic, as you might imagine. And so I think everyone in the courtroom is really struggling with these materials. The judge even at one point commented to the prosecutor that she appreciated their...
It's okay. I'm safe now. I will never allow the family to ever put me in that kind of position again. I'm good. My mental health, this was like 3 years ago. My mental health is so much better now. I'm working on myself and everything. But I just said it to point out that Halidol, like, put me in a state where it was almost like I was standing right next to myself. Like I was like an observer, but I wasn't there. It's just very strange.
Efforts to sanitize the images that were shown to the jury as much as possible. Jurors are also having a very difficult time looking at this material. I do notice that they are looking a lot over in the direction of the victims' families as much of this testimony has played out.
Okay. It is, I mean, it's heartbreaking. Our guests are staying with us. Coming up next, this is, I think, an important question in all of this, with the crime scene and what we're learning. Was this a sex crime?
Steer Creek, the Monon High Bridge is over that way. And over here is where the bodies were.
Sarah Boone.
I'm going to pop it forward. Be sure to give this live a thumbs up. And I'm asking tonight that you share my content. Help me get out there into the algorithm. Sharing is what I think will help me out tremendously. So if you can share, you can share to your community section on YouTube. You can, if you click the share button, it'll give you lots of options. You can share to YouTube YouTube, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, a bunch of places that you can share it to, and it would help me out tremendously. I've been actually sharing our content over to my LinkedIn page because that's the new up and coming site that I've heard like in 2025, the 3 sites to watch, the 3 social medias to watch is YouTube, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Oops.
It's flat. This is where they were found.
That's Barbara McDonald on the scene, at the crime scene, on the property where Abby and Libby were found, but also the creek. Very important because evidence is found in the creek, and according to prosecutors, the girls and the killer had to cross
He had a nonstop erection, so it would make sense that he was sitting there telling stories because he couldn't stop the erection. That would make sense. And Harlot O'Hare says, and I think you said earlier he had an erection at an inappropriate time. Wonder if it was medically caused by being over medicated. Yep. You know, here's the thing. The state will come on and say, oh, we have video evidence of Richard Allen's car going westbound and whatever, but they don't show the evidence. They don't show the video evidence. They show a still. And what happened is that they don't have the video evidence. The officer that went to get the video evidence simply took out his phone and took pictures of it, stills, didn't get the video evidence and left. And then when they decided like 2 years later or something, they wanted it, the place is like, we don't have it. You didn't take it. So they do these shady things where they build it up like, oh, we're going to show you all of this. And then it's like, oh, and Richard Allen had an erection, but he was also over medicated and he had an erection for days. They don't say all that. It's small town BS, in my opinion. And it makes me really angry because I practiced in a small town social work, and I would go into the jails there. But like, I knew that there was corruption in the town. One of the judges, when one of the judges used to do cocaine or the white stuff with people. He would like do this where he would binge. He would get a hotel room and go off and binge, and but he was at the time he was a high powered lawyer and then became a judge. So this is like small town, and this was in small town Michigan, and we're talking about Delphi, Indiana. So yeah, I consider to be one and the same.
Creek to get to where they were. Now, let's talk about the 2 victims here. Again, young girls and how they were found, what they were wearing. We begin with Abby. Abigail Williams is found in a...
Guys, I've lived a life. No, I've lived a life, and I think we've all lived a life, and if we can grow and become better people from those things, I think it does others good to know that other people have gone through these similar situations and they still can rise up and not let that take you down.
Sweatshirt, but it was Libby's sweatshirt, not her own sweatshirt. She was wearing Libby's sweatshirt. She's wearing 2 bras. She's wearing Libby's jeans, and she's wearing a tank top. Strange.
So again, did you see the photo that I provided of the 2 girls? Abby seemed to be quite a bit smaller than Libby, in my opinion. And so here Abby is wearing Libby's sweatshirt, her bra and Libby's bra, Libby's jeans, a tank top, and I think she had one of her high top sneakers on.
Right? So her clothes are off and she's got Libby's clothes on. In the meantime, Libby is
found... Abby's clothes were like off in the trees and stuff.
Found wearing nothing. She's nude. Abby's wearing Libby's clothes and Libby is found nude. more strange facts with all of this. Like, what does that mean? Brings me to my next question. Was this a sex crime? Was this a sex crime? And don't forget what we learned in the autopsy. There was no sign of trauma or sexual assault. Still with me, Barbara McDonald and Dr. Michelle Dupree. Barbara, let's talk more about the way the girls were found and where they were found. Because to answer this question about whether or not this is a sex crime, I think that's all very relevant about what is found where. And the clothes that are missing, I guess, are found in the creek, right?
Yes, about 30 or 40 feet away from where Abby and Libby were found. And they weren't all found in the same exact area. There was 3 different areas in the creek where that clothing was found.
That's another thing. He marched them across the creek. So they had to go across this water, this creek, to get to the other side. And so their feet, like Abby's feet, were dirty, but yet she had her shoes on.
Maybe 10 feet between each of those groupings. Some of the clothing was completely submerged at the bottom of the creek, and then other clothing was sort of caught up on tree limb debris that was in the creek that made it visible from the surface of the water.
Dr. Michelle Dupree, I'm trying to understand this, what happened here, right? The scene. And from your perspective, listening to some of this evidence, was this a sex crime?
Actually, it sounds like it could be. We know that there was some undressing and redressing, and we often find that when there is an element of sex involved. It doesn't mean that, of course, that there was any sex that took place. He may not have been able to perform. There's all kinds of...
a little bit of Crime Circus on Sunday. We had one of his videos up, and yeah, there's corruption. This case, if any case should be televised, it should be this. This is why cases should be televised, because they're really being shady. They're being so shady.
Of other things that this could have been. But it sounds like a sex crime to me.
He could very well be guilty. I mean, he could, because when there's smoke, there's fire, and but he's not getting a fair trial. And that's what the trial is all about, is for him to get a fair trial. It's not for any old person to be arrested. It's for the right person to be arrested and tried. It's also been said that it was an election year, and they needed an arrest.
Barbara McDonald, this gets right into the motive area, right? Like, why did this killer, and if it's Richard Allen, why did Richard Allen abduct these 2 girls? What was his motivation behind it? Was it sexual in nature? Have prosecutors alluded to that?
Yes, in his opening statement, prosecutor Nicholas McClelland said that the state believes that Richard Allen abducted these 2 girls and marched them down that hill so that he could, quote, have his way with them, but was interrupted. And then he marched them across the creek where he ultimately killed them.
So, Dr. Dupree, can there be molestation or sexual assault without leaving behind evidence of that?
Well, of course, we always hope that there is evidence left behind, but certainly there can be. He could have even tried sexual acts post-mortem. And that's not out of the realm of possibility. So there should be some evidence. It doesn't necessarily mean that we would find trauma. It just depends on, what he did in the sex act.
So, Barbara, can you remind us of how the girls were when they were found, in terms of positioning and such, and how that could potentially illuminate the situation of what motivated this killing?
Yeah, we also do know, Vinny, that sexual assault kits were done at autopsy. We have not heard yet whether any analysis is back on that and what that might reveal, if anything. But the girls were found in this sort of floodplain area of land that was owned by Ron Logan on the north side of Deer Creek. They were abducted from the bridge on the south side of that creek and marched about a quarter of a mile to where they ended up. Libby, as you mentioned earlier, Claire was, or rather Abby was fully clothed in Libby's clothing, which was wet. She also was wearing her Converse sneakers. They were also wet. But when those were taken off of her feet and photographed, the bottom of her feet, there was dirt and debris from the creek and from the ground on her feet. So it certainly indicates that at some point during this encounter, her shoes were off and then put back on. I also noticed you could only see one of her shoes in the photographs that were shown in court. And in that photograph, her shoe appears to be untied with the tongue pulled out of it, as if you were prepping it to be taken off or put back on a foot. The other shoe was sort of under her leg, and I couldn't tell if that one was tied or what condition that one was in. And then Libby was near her. Their feet were closer together than their heads were, but they were still a couple of, maybe 2 feet apart where their feet were. And
we're out of time for
Libby
now. We're out of time for now. I'm Vinny Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.
Okay, let's keep going. We have this woman who reports what she saw and heard in the courtroom. This is 7 gruesome moments in the disturbing Delphi case, but she talks about the blood spatter and how the girls were found.
YouTube channel, and she's been attending the trial in Delphi each day. Lauren, take me into the courtroom, first of all, for the very latest. I know this has to be just excruciating for the family of Libby German and Abby Williams.
It must be excruciating. I actually looked over at them several times to see, and there have been times where Libby's mother's hands are covering her face and her daughters are consoling her, rubbing her back. We are seeing crime scene photos, and today we saw autopsy photos. We heard how the girls died. We heard more about their wounds. We saw the wounds. It was very traumatic today in court.
The pathologist, it's my understanding, testified that both girls died from deep slash wounds to their throats. It's just horrific. We know that Libby was found naked and there were sticks over her body, and that Abby was wearing Libby's clothes, which I still don't quite understand. I don't know if the state will ever be able to explain that fact, but there was some discussion about whether or not there was a sexual assault of Abby. So can you tell us a little bit about that testimony of both girls, obviously?
Yes, the sexual assault kits that were done on both girls were discussed today, and it was told by the pathologist that there were no visible traumatic injuries that would show sexual assault, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't sexual assault. There were just no visible injuries, and I think it's important
So far, they have not talked about any fingerprints. And here's another kicker. There was a hair found in one of the girls' hands. And do you know who it was from? I'm just going to take a little beat here. Take a guess. Do you know who that hair was from? It was from somebody in the lab. So not only is it corrupt, but this case is contaminated.
He presented it that way. While there were no visible injuries or evidence that shows a sexual assault, that doesn't mean there wasn't sexual assault. And I just want to point out, the fact that Libby was found nude. I mean, that in itself, a little girl, undressing, I can't imagine that isn't sexual assault.
It just had to be the most terrifying time of these poor girls' lives. And then Abby, you have to think at some point.
I think that it must have been the most terrifying time. And then, but I also think they were together and maybe that gave them some comfort, because I was trying to think would I have felt more comforted, because I was a crazy kid. I was a Gen Xer. We were out there doing stuff. I would have been up on that bridge with my friend walking, and this. And would I have felt more? Yeah, it would have. But it also would have been even more terrifying, because I would have been even more afraid to run if I could have gotten away, because my friend was there. How could you leave your friend? So I think that's a that's a tactic that these people use. They think that, you know, more than one person had to have done it, because how do you corral two 13 and 14-year-olds with just a pew-pew? But to me, that seems very easy, because he's an adult. He's got the you know, the brains. Your brain isn't fully functioned until you're 25 years old. So I mean, and we're told as younger people to not so much. I think that's kind of starting to die away, but to obey adults and stuff like that. Oh, these girls. It just breaks me that they suffered, you know, because like I said at the beginning, you just always hope that they don't suffer. But I think these girls suffered.
Because we know there was that photo of her that's been circulating on social media for years, plus the video
I do too.
showing her with the clothes that she left the house in.
I think that, well, she would have had to have been at one point. Harlot says that she thinks that since Abby was redressed, she was at one point undressed as well in the buff. And you wonder if he had them start dressing in each other's clothes to give them time to escape, but unalive them instead. Maybe they thought they were gonna. That's even worse, to think that they're gonna get away, and he comes back and does that. Although I think somehow Abby, because Abby didn't react to it, her hand, she was either, her hands were either tied or she was not awake.
And then she's wearing, for some reason, Libby's clothing. We don't know if they believe the killer then put her in those clothes or what. We don't know. But talk to me a little bit about what happened when they showed the video of Bridge Guy, because that happened in the last day or two, where the jurors were presented with that. We've seen the enhanced video over the years, but we've never seen that full video.
Right. The full video, turns out, was 43 seconds long. We watched it a few times in the courtroom. At first, the first time you see it, you can't necessarily, unless you have really good eyesight, you maybe even miss Bridge Guy in the background behind Abby. You have Libby filming, and you have Abby sort of out on the bridge, and you do see somebody in the background, but the cell phone is kind of going up and down. And I think that maybe this is my perception, that maybe she was sort of trying to pretend that she wasn't necessarily filming, because then as Abby came across the bridge, the phone started to point at some gravel. And that is actually where you hear down the hill very faintly. And you don't see Abby's face, you see the gravel, you see her pants, you see quite a shaky video, and you hear this voice, what sounds like a little girl. I wrote in my notes, it sounds so young, where she says, "There's no path," as in it's so ominous. It's like they realize they're at this dead end, and that they're on this other side of a railroad bridge. Nobody else is around, and a man is stating to them down the hill, and Abby or stating there's nowhere to go, essentially, but saying there's no path. It's such a heartbreaking thing to hear.
Because these girls, I mean, they're complying with an order from an adult, and the state's theory is that there was a firearm present to get them to comply. So you have to imagine they're just terrified. I mean, I just can't even imagine.
I can't imagine either. And the more we learn in court, the more brutal this crime becomes. It's really unfathomable. And right, to just, I cannot imagine what those two girls went through in their last hour.
It's just awful. There have been a number of witnesses who testified about seeing Bridge Guy. And something that's been pointed out is that none of these witnesses have been asked, was that Richard Allen? And maybe that's because that's a question for the jury to answer. But a number of...
No, that's a very common thing that they do. They say, is this man in the courtroom now? Can you identify him? And they've not asked any of these people that supposedly saw Richard Allen out on this trail to identify him. And they've come in with, the one had the Justin Bieber photo that looked like a 16-year-old. One of the girls had him draw, and they're saying that was Richard Allen. Then another girl who is 5'7" said that the person was taller than her, so at least 5'10", maybe 6 foot tall. Richard Allen is 5'4", although the prison has him at 5'5", but he's 5'4". So I'm 5'9", and I always know when somebody is taller than me and shorter than me. I know it. I clock it. And usually I clock more so when somebody's shorter than me, because not too many people are shorter than me, or women at least.
People described, a number of witnesses described seeing Bridge Guy. One that testified said that she saw Bridge Guy, I guess, on a road, and his legs, I guess, appeared bloody and muddy. So tell us a little bit about that testimony. It was a woman named Sarah Carba, I believe.
Yes, we heard from Sarah this morning in court, and Sarah testified, and she testified with certainty to the point that she says that she was driving. It was around 4 p.m. because there is surveillance camera capturing her driving the direction she says, and it was just before 4 p.m. on February 13th, 2017. And she frequented the Monon High Bridge Trail daily or often. She lived nearby. She would walk her dog there. And she says that on the side of the road, she saw a man who was muddy and bloody. She repeated that it was certain that is what she saw, that he had mud, especially at the top, and then he was bloody.
This woman became argumentative during her testimony. Her first times, she just said that she saw a man that was muddy. But on the third time, she added bloody into it. On the third time. Isn't that? And she became very argumentative over this.
He lowered down on his pants that there was blood. And she then says that after she saw him, she learned about the two missing girls. When she learned that they were then found deceased, and then she learned about Bridge Guy and saw the photo, she thought that was absolutely him. And then that is when she decided to share this with police.
She sat on it for 2-3 weeks. She saw this, she knew all of this, and she sat on it for 2 or 3 weeks.
Now, defense, the cross-exam was interesting, and they claimed that she's allegedly changed her testimony over the years, that she originally just said muddy, muddy, muddy. And then the next interview, she said muddy. And then the next interview, she then stated bloody, but not muddy. She was fairly defiant with cross-exam, saying that her testimony has never changed, that she has always said muddy and bloody, and that if there is some interview that's missing, she actually alleged there might be missing video of a third interview. It was quite an interesting moment in court that that's not on her and that's not her issue, but that she had always said that she saw a man who was muddy and bloody.
Yeah, it sounded like she was very defensive on cross-examination and even brought up the missing videos that we've heard about, the defense saying that there was a DVR that was recorded over for some reason because of the settings on it. The crime scene investigators have really been grilled in this case because the defense is alleging that the investigation was botched. There's been discussion about how many pictures were taken of the bullet found at the scene. That's going to be a major point of contention. The state says it was cycled through Richard Allen's gun. The defense is questioning that assertion. So they really were grilled by the defense team.
They really were. And I actually think that the defense, in my opinion, from what I saw, I think
we're going to move forward. Here is another one with the 8 disturbing updates in the Delphi case.
Trail. Firearms examiner Melissa Oberg said she was able to identify Allen's gun as having cycled the crime scene cartridge. The defense went after this very hard, questioning Oberg's methods, saying it was speculative. But
so
she
apparently
said
there was a gun, or pew-pew involved in this, and no rounds were spent, like shot, but there was one that was cycled and then was found in between. There was a bullet found in between the two girls, and it was matched back to whose gun? Or pew-pew? Richard Allen's.
Quote, an ejector mark is an ejector mark, whether it's fired or cycled. Then talk turned to what Richard Allen told detectives, specifically when they searched his home. Indiana State Police Lieutenant Jerry Holman said Allen told him, it doesn't matter, it's over, when police were searching his home. Days later, when Allen and his wife went to pick up his car at the Lafayette police post, Holman asked Allen what he meant when he said that. Allen said the damage had been done, that police had searched his house, talked to his neighbors and his coworkers, and now everyone thinks he's a murderer. Holman also showed Allen a photo of Bridge Guy, and Allen responded, "There's no way that it could have been him if it was taken from one of the victims' phones." One thing that's very controversial, the fact that Holman lied to Richard Allen several times during this interview. And that's allowed. A lot of people don't like it, but a U.S. Supreme Court case allows law enforcement to lie to suspects. Allen was adamant throughout the interview that he didn't kill the girls and that the bullet found at the crime scene could not have come from his gun. Allen was quoted as saying, "I don't care what you do to me, I'm not going to ever confess to something I didn't do." Police then arrested Allen and charged him with the murders. The jury also heard that
Here's
Richard
the thing: we all think that we wouldn't confess to something that we didn't do, but he was put in a prison, and he's in a prison, and you've got these. This is what he's saying. There were guards that had patches that say "In Odin We Trust," and these guards were the ones that forced him to write these things and to call his wife, and they were always in earshot. You know, he says he's being harassed in prison.
Allen's DNA was not found at the crime scene. And remember that hair in Abby Williams's hand that the defense brought up during jury selection? Well, now a DNA analyst has testified that that hair actually belonged to Libby German's sister, Kelsey, who dropped the girls off at the trail that day. Abby was found wearing Libby's clothes.
Now, I don't know where this comes from, because just today they have said that the hair comes from somebody in the lab. So I don't know why they're saying it was first reported that it was Libby German's sister, but it's been reported now that it's a man in the lab.
And the sweatshirt Libby had been wearing actually belonged to Kelsey. I want to bring in Susan Hendricks. She wrote the book Down the Hill, and she has been in the courtroom throughout the entire trial. Susan, some big news happened. The prosecution now wants to bring in Google searches and information from Richard Allen's tablet. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. And Jeanette, it's so good to see you and so good to be on. It really is all encompassing. I feel like that's my everyday, which it is. It's 9 a.m., usually to 6 p.m. I'm here in Lafayette, a short distance from Delphi, and this is my every single day. And so many people, including myself, have been waiting for so long to get to this point, especially an arrest, and now here. And again, Richard Allen, innocent until proven.
They tested the hair, and it was a man in the lab, so it was contaminated. They mixed up the hairs. So when they tested it, it was a man in the lab, and then they fixed it. And then, they're like, oh no, wait, it's Libby's sister.
Guilty. But there are highs and lows. And as you know, there are wins and losses in every trial, and depending kind of what evidence and the cross-examination as well. But this was the end of the day, and it started out with DNA evidence and with a woman from a lab, and it was not in the prosecution's favor. And so you go back and forth here. And Nick McClelland, the jury was led out of the room, stood up and said, "Your Honor, I'd like to discuss new evidence that I'd like to submit to the court." Obviously, the defense has to know about this. And they did, based on their response, obviously. But and he said, it's Richard Allen's Google searches. And this day you sit in different places depending on the day. And this day I'm right behind him. I mean, the first row. And I see him kind of cock his head and look with like a furrowed brow. And the defense objected and based it on case law, and essentially referring to a case law that said, how do we know that it's that person's computer? Meaning, can you prove that they're the only ones with access to a computer? And referencing sexual abuse, I believe it was with the stepfather and Nick McClelland, because the judge said, "Nick, do you have anything, McClelland, to respond to that?" And he said, "I do. It's been a while since I've read that case law." So it seems like maybe, I don't know, if we had a lawyer,
we would get in some new evidence, Richard Allen. And let's go actually to today. Crime Talk talks about what went down in the courtroom today. So let's listen to what they did on today. Hold on. I had it queued up. There it is.
And you can check us out anytime on any of your favorite. Let's talk about Richard Allen. All right. A clinical psychologist who examined Richard Allen while he was in custody described her interactions with Allen during his time at the Westerville.
So this is the psychologist in the prison system, her day today, and this is what's his name, Scott, right? He's talking about it.
Correctional facility, including the account of the day of the murders. Now, for those who don't know, if you haven't been following this, Richard Allen is charged with 4 counts of murder in connection with the death of Abby Williams and Libby German near the Moton High Bridge there in Delphi, Indiana. Now, state police arrested him. The Indiana State Police arrested him back in October of 2022, and we are now on day 10-11 of the jury trial. So, jurors watched 2 video interviews with Mr. Allen from October of 2022. One involved the current county sheriff, Tony Liggett, and the county prosecutor, Steve Mullen. The jury also heard from the warden and several correctional officers concerning alleged confessions that Mr. Allen was allegedly supposedly making. At one point, Allen said he killed the girls with a box cutter and disposed of it at a CVS dumpster. He just coincidentally happened to work at a CVS. Now, the correctional officers testified that Allen displayed odd behavior while he was in custody. So when Dr. Monica Walla took the stand, she was employed as the lead psychologist for the Indiana Department of Corrections, and she was a independent contractor for them. She primarily worked at the Westerville facility and provided services to Allen while he was in custody. Now, Walla took on Allen because of the high-profile nature of the case, and she first saw him back in November of 2022, and he was frequently on a suicide watch, which meant that there were various correctional personnel had to keep close observation of him. Now, Walla didn't initially discuss the Delphi murders with Allen, and in fact, actually discouraged him from talking about this case with others. That's what all professionals do. Don't talk about your case. Anyway, in April of 2023, the patient, Mr. Allen, said, "I killed Abby and Libby, and I'm really sorry about that." And he said he wanted to make sure that they were dead so they didn't suffer, and then that they were deceased by the time that he had left the scene. Well, we say he went right back on suicide watch during that time period, and he apparently became very tearful and said he committed the murders by himself. Now, according to the psychologist, this is Dr. Walla's account, Allen said his intentions were of a sexual nature, and he alluded to having a sexual addiction. Now, he also apparently stated to the psychologist that he believed the girls were older, thought they were maybe at least 18 or 19, but then he also thought, man, they could have been as young as maybe 11 years old. Now, he also stated that he was an alcoholic, and he had been a victim and a perpetrator of child molestation, both a victim and a perpetrator of child molestation. Now, he wanted to apologize to the girl's family, according to the doctor, and Dr. Wall said that he was glad he didn't kill himself and expressed appreciation for being housed and closed at this particular facility. Now, he told her he slept with his Bible and had committed himself to God. Now, his thought process over the place and time was emotion was quite up and down, she described. And during a May report, Walla noted that Allen said he killed the girls, asked if it was okay for him to kill himself, and added he didn't want to die because he was too much of a coward. Now, he did have trouble staying on topic, according to the good doctor, and noted that he didn't appear to be psychotic, but she believed he had situational psychosis, meaning that he would have episodes of psychosis at times and then go into remission. Now, on May 3rd, Allen apparently wanted to call his wife, and that recounted the events on February 13th from 2017. Mr. Allen said that he met his mother in the morning in Mexico, Indiana. He was offered an invitation to go out to lunch, but he declined. He told the psychologist that he drank some beers and then went to the trail. So Allen told the psychologist that Abby and Libby were walking on the trail, and he followed them. He said he did something with his gun, and that's when the bullet fell out. Now, he ordered the girls down the hill with the intent to rape them. Now, by this account, he saw something, either a man or a van, and it was unclear, that startled him, and he ordered the girls across the creek, cut their necks, and then covered their bodies with tree branches. He walked to the car, which he had parked near a nearby building, and the doctor noted that Allen seemed relieved after making this admission. Now, Allen continued to live his life normal after the killings, according to the good doctor. On May 5th, Allen was at a high risk for suicide, leading the correctional officers to watching quite closely. And then on May 9th, he said, "I just want to sign my confession." Now, Wallace suggested, hey, you may want to talk with your attorneys. And Allen talked about planning his last meal and then ultimately killing himself. And he exhibited no evidence of psychosis or symptoms at this time, according to the doctor. Now, on May 10th, Allen had trouble with his prison-issued tablet, and then he was able to call his wife. Now, during that conversation, he mentioned the electric chair and asked if his family still loved him. Now, she said, quote, "I didn't do everything I said I did, but I killed Abby and Libby," he said during this conversation. His wife then hung up on him. Then on May 11th, Allen said he wanted closure by apologizing to the girls' families, adding that he needed to forgive himself. Now, after the break in the proceedings, apparently Walla discussed Alan's bizarre behavior and said that she believed that he was faking symptoms. Then in an April 10th report, she mentioned that papers were strewn all over his cell. She believed that the documents were from the discovery in his case, and she said it appeared to be that he received materials around the time and he started confessing to the Delphi murders. Then in an April 13th report, Walla said Alan's behavior became even stranger, with him lying in and consuming feces. She believed that he was having an emotional breakdown from guilt and believed the behavior surfaced after he saw the discovery, all the evidence in the case. Then on August 3rd, a report noted that Alan said that he wanted to go to heaven but was afraid of dying, that he was confused, and he didn't seem as though he was not rational anymore. Now, during cross-examination, defense attorneys Bradley Rozzi tore into Walla on the stand, questioning her credentials and her interest in the Delphi case. Now, Walla told the court that she followed the case through podcasts and social media and even engaged with posts about it. Now, as the investigation developed, she said she became more involved and used the DOC database to search for information that the public didn't have access to. She followed podcasts and online chats, contributed
the DOC database
information, and told people where to go for more information. She became even more interested in the case after Alan's arrest. She shut her account down after someone pointed out that she was following the case a little too closely, and she did disclose her interest in the case to her employer. And she never disclosed to her employer, right, the Department of Corrections, "You were following the case closely." Rozzi asked her, and she responded, she did not. "We discussed it when we learned we were coming into this facility," she stated, and she told the court that she never made a formal report. Now, when Rozzi asked her if she would stop following the case if she had to do it all over again, she replied, probably. She testified that she sometimes shared information with Alan about what she saw online. She said Alan's psychiatric history involved major depressive disorders and said it was possible he demonstrated characteristics of dependent personality syndrome. When Rozzi asked if Alan was a fragile man while DNC, she responded that he was. And Rozzi asked about the cell conditions and said the lights were always on. And Walla told the court she believed that he could dim them, referring to the lights. Now, Alan had no privacy in the cell, and Rozzi suggested he was more secure or restricted than other inmates. He couldn't go out and mingle with other inmates, could he? No, he couldn't. Anyway, that's where we left off with Mr. Allen's testimony here today. We also had some testimony from a correctional officer, Michael Roberts, who was a suicide companion assigned to Mr. Allen. Now, Roberts had detailed logs of an alleged confession that he supposedly heard. On April 7th of 2023, Roberts...
Now, this is where I was wrong. I'm sorry. It was a companion, it was a guard, not a doctor, that stated he had an erection.
Wrote at 12:34, "Dear Lord, forgive me for molesting Abby, Libby, Kevin, and Chris. I want to confess I know a lot more." On April 23rd, Roberts wrote in his log that at 2 p.m., Alan said, "I killed Abby and Libby. My wife wasn't involved. I want to confess." Then on April 26, 2023, Roberts wrote that Alan said, "Can I talk? Can you listen? I killed Abby and Libby. How do I prove I'm insane?" On June 18th of 2023, Roberts noted that at 3:30 p.m., Alan allegedly said, "Why are you doing this? Do you know God? Do you know why I'm here? I killed Abby and Libby." Now, Roberts said he saw outrageous acts of misbehavior to get the attention of guards who were watching. He went on to say that he believed Alan was acting up more than having a mental health crisis. On cross-examination, Roberts was pressed on Alan's behavior behind bars, and defense attorneys asked if Roberts had any formal mental health training, in which Roberts replied only what the state had provided. Now, Roberts revealed that Alan began smearing feces on his cell wall, as well as putting it on his face. Roberts also testified that he remembers Alan hit his head on the wall for a long time at one point, making his face black and blue. He also told the court that Alan would refuse food at points for long periods of time. And Roberts also had to admit that Alan's suicide companions were going back to the general population at the prison and spreading information about Mr. Allen. Now, Correctional Officer John Miller also testified that Alan expressed his desire to burn in hell while confessing to the killings. And Miller testified how Alan said he molested his sister and may have even touched his daughter. Now, Miller testified Alan had an erection while he was talking about all this. Miller went on to say that on April 9th, at about approximately 6:56 a.m., quote, "I only killed them to give my family more time to be free." Then at 7:58 a.m., Alan said, "I'm so sorry I killed those kids. I may have touched my daughter. I can't remember." The jury asked Miller if he was normal to act like Alan while refusing medication, and Miller responded, "It's possible." And then Correctional Officer Brandon Fisher testified that on April 29th, Alan not only confessed to the murders, but also provided some details as to what happened. Fisher said Alan originally wanted to rape the girls, but he panicked and ended up killing them. Alan allegedly told Fisher he killed the girls with a box cutter and threw it in a dumpster at CVS. And after 13 months, Alan was ultimately transferred from the Westerville to the Wabash Correctional Facility. And there, a correctional officer by the name of Jason Bedwell took the stand. Bedwell testified that on February 4th of 2024, Alan again confessed to the murders while crying and talking to himself. Bedwell said, "I'm sorry for what I did. Sorry for killing them." That's what he noted. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of the information is coming.
So, and we're going to move on. Nancy Grace was out front of the court, well, is in court today. Thank you, Heavenly, for sharing this with me. Heavenly is one of my moderators, and she's here tonight. She's the best, and I want to do a huge shout out. And it's her son's birthday today, too. Oh, and it's her birthday. What's the date today? In what? On November 4th?
We learned, and this is before, and Susan, jump in if I'm wrong, before it came out, Cheryl, we learned that Richard Allen had confessed to having a gun, targeting the two girls, hearing a male approach. I couldn't tell if it was in a car.
A little side note, I just love Nancy Grace. She's like my spirit animal, and I think she looks wonderful right there. Like her skin is looking really good.
Or not. Covering their bodies with branches, intending to rape them. We now know they were naked. That wasn't released. He talked about cutting their throats. We didn't know that the perp had a gun. We didn't know that their throats were cut. We didn't know that they were totally undressed.
I know,
both of them totally undressed at one point.
I don't understand how like Nancy Grace and like Minnie Politan and those other people, they're like pretty outraged. Like, why is this happening? How is this this is like, they're like, this is a real whodunit. Like, we don't, like obviously they're not sure that Richard Allen did it. And they're like, we're sitting in the court and it's not being televised. So we're like having to write all these notes. And it's like we're on the jury. And like, I wouldn't want to be the jury. Like, I wouldn't want to be the jury either because no. But it seems to me like in hearing what Nancy Grace has to say that she leans more towards that he did it.
Says his intent was to leave them. He explains that away by saying his quote problem, that's what he's calling it, started when he molested his sister when he was younger. I mentioned the branches. He revealed so much that had not been made public, Cheryl.
He said things only the killer would know.
Yeah.
He said branches.
He does say things that only I'm sure I'm being demonetized by this point. So if you could really share this, it would help me even more because I mean, it's going to be unlimited because all these, they're saying killer, murder, sexual, they're just saying it's just happening. It's happening. So, if you could share it, this will at least help me get it out there so people know that I'm reporting on this case. But anyway, back to this. He's saying things that only the killer would know, I think, in my opinion. But I don't think the state has a strong enough case to convict him beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think so.
Not twigs, not sticks, but long branches. He said he had a gun. Leggett testified that on the video,
if he's being framed, they would know he had a gun. And the people that went into his, so see, I'm in the conspiracy. I'm in the weeds. I'm in the conspiracy weeds, and I can't get out because there's just too many conspiracies over here that there's just too many holes in this case.
He
drive a truck through all these holes.
He also said,
oh man, that's right. That's right. Hold on. You just reminded me of something, Cheryl, and I thank you. Hearing the gun rack. I mean, that corroborates finding the bullet there. He didn't know when he racked the gun, he released a bullet. So, to Susan Hendricks, can you hear a gun racking in the video the girls took?
Yes, 100%. Absolutely.
Describe it.
That's when you hear that's the gun. You hear, but you absolutely hear the gun.
What do you mean you can hear the gun? Hear the gun do what?
They're saying that in the video you can hear the gun go click. When you clock it and it goes click click. So I've looked and I can't seem to find. Was this case? Is it being tried still in Delphi, or did they change to a different town, or are they literally still in the same small community trying this? Because I don't think he'll get the jury. How can the jury be fair, or the judge. Like, so are they like in a different part of Indiana? I hope, at least.
Do that sound. Shh. Like the end, Detective Holman held up the gun and did it in court 2 days ago. Like, shh, and it was frightening to the jury.
Okay, I finally got that out of Susan Hendricks. Remember, I'm a JD, not a DDS. I don't know how to pull a tooth, but I can declare you a hostile witness and cross-examine you, but you know that. Joining me right now is Dr. Mark Mirabello. He is a professor emeritus of history, Shawnee State University, and author of the Odin Brotherhood. Dr. Mark Mirabello, the defense has tried and tried. They've been rebuffed about bringing in the theory that Odinists did these murders. You know, Odinists represent Norse, they worship Norse gods like Thor. Okay, I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently it is.
So they're trying this in this small little town in Delphi, Indiana, with a judge that like probably does have drinks with I don't know.
According to your book, The Odin Brotherhood, but how could the defense?
Our
and
system,
for some reason in America,
our system is so far gone. Sometimes I worry. Sorry, I clicked off of there. But this is a guy. He's going to start talking about Odinism, but I don't think he gets the fact that it's not. I don't think people are saying that this ancient Norse pagan religion is doing this. They're saying that these white nationalists, these white supremacists have taken over part of it, and these are the people that they're doing it. And he goes in to talk about like, no, this wouldn't be white supremacists because white supremacists wouldn't kill off 2 young white girls in their prime that could still bear children. They would only do it to somebody who was a race traitor, which if they were like dating somebody of a different race. But I don't know. People that sacrifice people, I don't think they're really like into all like that. I think they're just sacrificing. In all of the sacrifice stories that I have ever heard of, they've never been like, no, that's a pure white baby. We're not gonna do the pure white baby. That's just not like, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I've studied Odinism for over 30 years.
I think my point
I've never
is
witnessed a sacrifice of animals.
Just going to do it if they're going to do it.
First of all, I noticed there's a lot of confusion over this issue. In Great Britain, they're called Odinists. In the United States, the most common name is Asatru. And for some reason in America, some academics and scholars and hate watch groups seem to associate the radical behavior with Odinist only, which is frankly not true. You can get the Asatru Alliance, Asatru Folk Assembly, which are really conservative. Now, they don't talk about killing or sacrifice. The difference is the extreme left will have black members, they'll have gay marriages. And on the extreme right, they're opposed to gay marriages, they're opposed to gay sex, generally speaking. And by the way, they view Odinism as an ethnic movement, much as Shinto is for Japan, and also as voodoo is for Haiti. A lot of voodoo practitioners object to Caucasians telling their secrets. So again, they don't do these violent things. And I remember saying before, and I just try to be really brief on this, given their interest in, frankly, white people, the radical Odinist on the right, there is no way, absolutely no way, they would kill 2 white girls. Again, I've said this many times. There were, they say, not that it's true, but they say 8% of the human race is white, 2% are women of potential childbearing age, and there is no way they would kill 2 white girls. They believe they have to save the white race. It's becoming extinct. And again, if they kill anybody, it would be what they call a race traitor. That's a white woman dating a non-white man. So There's nothing in Odinism that would justify this. And I'm not trying to get the fellow involved convicted. I'm just dealing with the facts. There is nothing in Odinism that would include the murder of 2 little girls, especially the murder of 2 little white girls, or the sacrifice.
With what I have seen and all of what I have seen, if he gets convicted from what they have presented, then he didn't have a chance at all anyway. If he gets, like, I don't know, some bombshell stuff might still be coming out, but if they went to the deliberation today on what they have presented and got convicted, then that man never had a chance. Never. Because this is like, yeah, I'm just, and the fact that they've gotten away with not having cameras in the courtroom just shows how far our country still has to come. Like, yeah.
Girls.
Dr. Mark Mirabello, that's more than I could ever have imagined. I did not want to interrupt you. I wanted to hear every word of that. Other than the branches and apparently twigs in the girl's hair, at one point it was argued that there was a letter, I think it was an F as in Frank, on a tree. That blood marking turned out to be a transfer. I just don't see how they can establish this far-fetched theory of Odinism. And, you know, Eric Faddis, I keep seeing online, hey, dummy, the judge overruled Odinism. It can't come in. But that hasn't stopped the defense from asking questions to support answers that they believe will build a foundation, Eric, to convince the judge to allow in Odinism. They're doing it on cross-examination with some of the witnesses. What do you think about that, Eric?
Oh, sure. One thing I think is that a lot of people believe Judge Gold has been pretty hostile towards the defense, excluding this Odinism defense in its entirety, which some people think is a heavy-handed ruling. You know, in listening to the other expert, the KKK lynched white people too, even though they were aligned with white people as racial extremists. So I don't think that rules out the possibility of this Odinist sacrifice involving 2 young white girls. These defense attorneys are simply trying to advocate for their client, put forth a reasonable, plausible, alternative explanation.
These defense attorneys that think that this Odinist thing is credible. There's 2 other defense attorneys that were on the case that are no longer on the case that still believe it too. Like they still believe that this is an Odinistic. I believe it. I'm at like 70%. I believe the Odinistic thing, and then the other half, it's just all this. He says all these things, but also he's saying all these things in custody, in prison, with saying that these guards are wearing these patches. Like, of course they're gonna, if he's being forced to say these things, he has to be told what to say. So I don't know. And he's having this mental break, and
which I think they're entitled to do, and I think this judge is handcuffing them.
Eric Faddis, are you familiar with a line of cases that find it to be reversible error if the judge disallows the defendant's sole defense?
Certainly, yes. That's in case law throughout the country, including in Colorado, where I practice.
So, bottom line, as far-fetched as this Odinist theory might be, I'm concerned that it's totally ruled out. But I'm sure the judge knows the law in this jurisdiction better than I do. I'd almost be mad if they didn't bring it.
Why is Nancy Grace bowing down to that? In the past, she would have been like, no, this is wrong. Even Nancy Grace is concerned that it's not being allowed in. There's something to this Odinistic thing. I really do believe it.
And I can't wait for the jury to hear an Odinist claim. But that said, joining me right now is forensic certified bloodstain pattern analyst, senior crime scene analyst, and death investigator, Jeffrey Gentry. Now listen to this, author of Forensic Science, Applications to Death and Crime Scene Investigations. I'm trying to figure out, Jeff, if there is a way based in the forensic evidence, specifically the blood evidence, that can support or destroy an Odinist defense, because I don't think the door is totally closed on that defense. I think if the defense can get enough facts in during cross-examination, they will revisit to the judge. Look, we've shown you one.
I've heard that that's what, and she's actually told them to do that. Like they can bring it up. Like she ruled and said no, but she said, the door's not closed. You can still revisit it during the trial. And so they are bringing this up in cross, and I think they're just waiting. They're just waiting for their door to open for this Odinistic. And I'm praying that it opens up, because why not let him have his defense? It doesn't make sense. Why can't you have this defense? What, in a fair trial, why can't you have this defense? I know the Tilted lawyer said he's going to cover this case on Friday, so maybe he'll answer that question.
2, 3, and 4 with the state's own witnesses on cross. That gives me a foundation to bring in Odinism. So how can the blood evidence be used to support an Odinist theory?
Well, it can definitely be used to contradict that theory. Based on what the professor talked about, it sounds like there could be some rituals associated with it. But the blood evidence is really good because it explains events. It explains how these two girls were murdered. It explains that one was possibly bound and then murdered in the place they were found. It explains that the other was standing up next to a tree and bled out, and then was moved. And I have actually investigated cases where bodies have been covered. I've been doing death investigation for over 16 years, and I've handled well over 300 homicide cases. And I've had bodies that were covered with branches. I've had bodies that were covered with tarps. I've had bodies that were wrapped and planning to be burned. So I've seen a lot of that. And it's always because the person realizes they've done something wrong and they have to quickly conceal that body before they leave the scene. So there's nothing there to suggest that that Odinism happened or there was some ritual associated with these killings. It's somebody that acted on impulse. They killed these two people quickly, left the scene in a hurry, and so that would, in a sense, debunk that theory.
Jeffrey Gentry, you really hit the nail on the head just then. To Cheryl McCollum, how many cases have you and I dealt with when I was prosecuting, you were investigating, where a murder victim is covered up with anything? It could be branches, as in this case, and you said branches, long branches.
Well, I think
it could be a sheet. I've had a case that I covered, didn't try it.
Gabby Petito covered up. I mean, I think it is common because if the person is ashamed in any way, they usually try to cover them up.
A case that I covered where the killer put a wicker bathroom trash can over the dead woman's head. We see faces covered with a sweater or clothing. It happens all the time. What am I supposed to believe? That the Odinist did all that?
Exactly. And he tells you he did it, and he tells you the motive. He was intending to rape them. And I want to talk a little bit about the blood myself. That blood on the tree is clearly a transfer from Libby. Libby also had 5 droplets on her thigh. That wasn't Odinism either. That's not some big secret. It was literally dripping from the injury to her throat.
I want to comment again on all the facts that came out in court that support the evidence. The facts that came out from his confessions in court that support the evidence. Susan Hendricks, I kept looking at him and I can see how he's trying to alter his appearance. The psychologist got on the stand and said she took him off constant suicide supervision because he was speaking coherently. He even said, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm too much of a coward to kill myself. I don't want to die. He wanted to apologize to the victims' families. He found religion behind bars, started sleeping with his Bible, and wanted to confess. Now, how in the hay Are they going to spin that out? And another thing, Susan Hendricks, and everybody on the panel, feel free. We're not having high tea at Windsor Castle with Prince William, okay? Another thing is when you look at his change of appearance, you hear the facts that only the killer would know. The video places him there, but also, I'm wondering if his wife is still believing him.
Yes, that's what I wonder
What do
too.
you guys think? What about it? Susan Hendricks, go ahead.
It appears she does, because when I look over and I see her crying and she's whispering with Richard Allen's stepfather, and the fact that she's willing to get on the stand for those Google searches says she's with him. I remember it was early on during one of the hearings. She looks over at someone sitting next to her and loudly says, "That's my man. That's my guy." So I feel like they've been together for so many years since high school. I do believe she's still backing him. And you're right, his appearance looks so much different.
Wait a minute. Susan Hendricks, hold on just a moment.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's, Cheryl, what about this? It's not so much that I'm sorry I did it. I just don't want to go to hell for it. I'm not convinced that she believes him. She just doesn't want him to be convicted, to have the father of her child convicted and sitting in life behind bars. I mean, how can she not hear this evidence?
Forget the evidence. He told her he was there. She has seen the video. She has heard his voice. She knows it's him. In her heart, she knows it. Now, whether or not she can believe it ever, that's a whole different story. But she knew long before anybody else. She wasn't posting on social media.
With Richard Allen, it's just so hard to you wouldn't be able to say, yeah, that's his voice or that's not his voice, because nobody can really say if that's his voice or not.
About the girls, she wasn't posting the posters. She wasn't, telling everybody, oh, who in the world could this possibly be? She saw him on the photograph. She heard
in the video. They've said that you can't even see the guy's mouth moving, so you don't even know if it's coming from that guy. Like, it could be another guy, which would be really weird, walking on the opposite side of the filming, because what they did was they had one of the girls walk over onto the opposite side, and so she was pretending like she was filming her friend, and she was really getting the guy coming up on him, because whoever the bridge guy was, he came up, and they knew there was a series of videos, like two or three of them, I think. And in one, she's like, they knew he was coming, but he was really far away. You couldn't even like hardly see him. He was like just a speck. And the bridge guy covered the distance fast. He was walking fast.
The voice. She knew the clothes, and he told her he was there.
Okay, two things. Number one, the whole community is out looking for these girls when they're missing. Everybody. Guys, I can't tell you how small of an area this is. It's like where I grew up in rural Bibb County. I mean, you would have to know how to get here. I got lost in the dark this morning, and that's with a navigator with me.
They didn't change
trying to get here.
Venues.
I missed the turn. Managed to circle back. You have to look to find this place. Then you have to look again to find the bridge, the Monon High Bridge. You don't just know that it's there. It's not a tourist spot. You have to live here to know how to find it. So while this very small community, what is it, less than 3,000 people, while everybody's out looking for the girls, where is he? He's not looking for the girls. I've not heard one thing about him trying to help find the girls. But the other thing, Cheryl, you want to tell me he's perfectly normal, cognitive, coherent, and all these times he speaks to the psychologist. Then he says to his wife, I did it. I effing did it. Why don't you believe me, woman? Then she goes, stop saying that. Calls the lawyer. The lawyer gets with him, and suddenly he starts eating paper and drinking out of the commode. He didn't do any of that before his wife called the lawyers.
Nancy, the only thing that I can think of, and keep in mind, I've known Walt since I was 14. Some level of me would have to protect our children. I just could not believe it. I could not allow this to be true for them. That to me is the only thing she can be doing.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I asked you about him suddenly drinking out of the commode and eating paper.
Again, the 9 police officers that testified, we heard them. They said he watched us and waited until we were looking at him to wash his face with the toilet water, drink the toilet water, smear the feces. He didn't do it when he wasn't under surveillance.
We are all headed back into the courtroom. I want to thank my guests for being with us, analyzing and shedding light on what we know right now as the facts continue to unfold.
Okay, so that is what's going on in the case. I'm going to continue sharing what I know about this case because I think that we need to get the word out there, especially since it's not being televised, that this really is distressing. This is, I don't know, it's like flying under the radar, but luckily I am seeing more and more people pick it up. I think we were all like kind of focusing on the Sarah Boone case, and now that case is like put on hold until December, until we know what our sentencing is. Now we've kind of switched our focus back over to this case, and it's like, what? Oh my gosh, they have nothing. They have nothing. I mean, like, nothing. Did he do it? I don't know if he did it or not. I can't say yes or no, but I can definitely say that there's reasonable doubt here. I really need to know when he began being medicated by the state. On this timeline, it would answer a lot of questions about his behavior. Yeah. If anyone knows, could you put down in the comments when Richard Allen began to be medicated by the state? Was it right away? Was it after he said when was it? So if you know, and I will try to research and see if I can figure it out. Catherine says, if he's innocent and being framed, I hope she knows. Heartbreaking. Yeah, very heartbreaking. Lori, are you patches on deputies in Indiana? I don't think when the whole patch thing came up, the warden said that he knew it was there and he made him remove it. And then the guy, one of the guards that had the patch came back with a tattoo of the patch under his eye. And they're not allowed to have tattoos on their face. This actually might be a good case to see if Cowboy RC, who was an ex, I'm going to email him tomorrow and see if he wants to talk about this case a little bit. We have a member that is an ex corrections lieutenant, and to see if like this is all normal behavior. Like, what does he think about this? Because I think he could shed some insight on what it's like to be in a prison, and if it's even possible for these guards to be doing this with him and so forth. So I think that's what I'll do. I think that's all I have for tonight. I hope you guys enjoy your Halloween. Today is October 30th, 2024. So I hope that everyone has a safe Halloween. And don't, turn your porch lights on if you're living in Michigan, because I know there's Devil's Night in Michigan. It might be like a Midwest thing. I have not seen it happen in Florida, but there's a lot of Michigan people in Florida. Okay, guys, I'm going to go. Thank you so much, Heavenly, for being here and modding for me. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Pauline and Catherine and Harlot O'Hara for stopping in. Yes, All Hallows Eve. Good night. And if nobody's told you this, oh no, you're in Michigan, no Waterford, Michigan, no fires yet. Yeah, it's always no gunshots in the air, no fires. I left that out. That like back in the day, they used to shoot guns up in the air. That was like more in the Detroit area. Okay, so anyway, guys, and light fires too. So that's why I say I think it's probably illegal these days to celebrate Devil's Night. But for us, we just would go out with some soap and some toilet paper and some eggs. If nobody's told you this today, and even if they have, I'm still going to tell you this. I love you guys so, so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys. Be sure to share and like. Hi, guys. Welcome to Para Women Radio. I'm Amy.
Carefully strumming this old guitar, words rolling out into the fire. Never ask why my heart burned blue. Here in the haze where you inspire me. Here in the darkness I hear my cue. Time to find some solitude. Here where my soul bleeds openly, deep in the heart of sin and you. Here in the blue, I'm falling deep into you. Carefully strumming this old guitar again, words rolling out into